Hello and welcome back to another episode of Paranormal Investigation Story. Today I want to talk about our return to the cinema from episode 2. We actually returned a second time, but I'm going to talk about the third. On the second time we went there, Kevin, our cameraman, was kicked hard in the leg. That was significant. And also Sue felt a brush on her hand. We didn't spend too long in the cellar of the cinema that day, but on this third occasion we went there first. Now before this third visit, Si, who was also in our team, gave me an envelope and said, I've had these names and words come into my mind now before, as in episode 2, he'd had good hits, so he thought he'd try that again. He wrote them down, gave them to me in a sealed envelope, which I forgot to take on the night. So it was 2 days later, after the investigation I was reviewing, and I finally looked in the envelope. So the team on the night I want to talk about was me, Si, Kevin, Sue and Jill. We were joined by a worker of the cinema called Julia, a young girl who had sensitive abilities, although didn't use them, didn't train them. So as we descend into the cellar with all our equipment, doing baselines and things, I think Sue was the first person to stop in her tracks and say, I've seen a shadow. Unlike Sue to normally say things like that, but yes, Sue saw a shadow move around. We continue. Si reports he sees a shadow. Kevin reports he sees a shadow moving around. Now, we're aware of our shadows, don't get me wrong. We set up meters, dictaphones, things like that. But one particular meter Si brings just never goes off. In all the years we used it, I think it went off this once. But we'll come to that. Now, Julia, the staff member, doesn't like this cellar. Doesn't like cellars, in fact. And so feels uncomfortable from the off. But she starts to become overwhelmed with a teary emotion. She starts to well up, but she's like, I'm fine, but for some reason I feel sad. One of the first major words we get through the Ouija board is dwarf. Odd, right? Now Si very much says, Chris, get the envelope out. I wrote dwarf, weirdly. It seemed like such a stupid thing to put. And again, when I check it later on, days later, yes, he wrote dwarf. He also wrote about 4 words that didn't come up. Let's balance this out, but still, he got dwarf. Now, what that represented was the spirit was telling us she suffered from dwarfism. She was a little person. This, again, becomes more apparent later. But it was a little bit slow at first to get the trust of the spirits. We ended up basically saying all our names. I'm Chris, I'm Sue. Si says, I'm Si, and the glass moves to no. We all sort of chuckle and he goes, I'm Simon. No. Well, what am I called then? And it's spelled out Green, yet again. I said, okay, what does green represent? Light. Now, if you're not keeping up with the previous videos, Green Man is what all the spirits seemed to call Si, to do with him crossing them over. They see the light doorway, they go through, they've been passed over. Don't ask me for any more details, that's pretty much all I know. We're talking to the spirits, and suddenly this difficult meter in question blares so much, and I just didn't recognise the noise. I'm like, what is that? So I says, that's my meter that never goes off. Jill sees a shadow yet again. The meter goes beep beep, and then boop, 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 like 7 times. There's twice and 7 times. It's like, whoa, this thing flashes, it makes noise. It's going off when it never does. I grab my camera, put it down. Right, spirit, do that again. This meter just doesn't ever go off. Never did again. Now, yes, it's a creepy cellar, but we're kind of used to that sort of thing. However, there's an unnerving feeling starting to rise amongst us. I'm asking for a spirit's name, and Si's, did you hear that? Now, I never heard anything, and the recording didn't hear anything, but Si, in his ear, heard something, but a voice, he just didn't know what it said. Now, we'll call that spirit on the board, dwarf, Spirit 1. Okay? The atmosphere changes, you know something new has come to the board. This is Spirit 2. We find out that Spirit 2 stroked Sue's hand, supposedly, the time before. And there's never more than 2 spirits in this area, so that's one thing to know. When Spirit 1 backs off from the board, Julia starts to feel teary again, like it stepped near her and she's feeling the emotions of it. Now with Spirit 2 on the board, we find out that that one is the only one that's seen, and he's a male. I decide to ask this spirit for confirmation to prove what activity has been reported down here. David from the cinema tells me that the door to the cellar is always shut, and so he's opening it for ease of traversing the steps to go change the pops and stuff, the sodas. I decide to ask the spirit the opposite of what happens to see if it will correct me. The spirit says D-O-O-R. Then my next question is to catch the spirit out. I know that the door is always kept closed, so I say, is it you who always keeps the door open? It spells yes, and I'm thinking, yep, caught you out. And then Si says, does somebody else close it, spirit-wise? The door says yes. So I'm back to square one, but some spirit is messing with the door. It said door. David says the door's always opening or shutting. It seems like there's a fight over having this door open or closed. Skipping forward a little bit, we determine that these 2 people were married, and it was a marriage of convenience, a bit like a business partnership really. The gentleman is making money from the small lady. It's said that she is the one to perform on stage, but also there's a darker turn of how he makes money from her. Now Jill is looking around. She actually sees a face near Kevin, the cameraman, come out of the air. Pretty frightening. Si is feeling a breeze around him. Now this is we're downstairs in a cellar, there's no wind. Kevin then reports feeling a big draft. It's like the spirits are walking around, and it's very much a common feeling that we get. You feel them pass by you quite a lot. But back then we were quite worried because this is early days for us still. You sort of feel the apprehension building, and it swells between all of you. I know Jill reported hearing a breath very near her. Now, on recording, I didn't catch anything. Julia, meanwhile, is starting to strongly feel emotions of this lady. She says, I feel her pain at being used by this guy. The next critical thing to happen is a spirit on the board is drawing out the shape of a square, a small square, and then a bigger square, and this just keeps getting bigger and bigger, weirdly. And this becomes like the signature, as it were, of the male spirit. What's your name, spirit? I ask, and it spells boss. Male, as I say. Now, this is where I start getting whistling on the recording. As we're talking, as we're not talking. Nobody was whistling. But, I'm hearing whistling under a speak, whistling in the gaps where we're waiting for responses. It's quite unnerving, but cool. Now, because this man's on the board, I'm trying to get him involved in intermingling with us. I'm feeling a cold around us all. I say, well, what's the price to see this performance from your wife? What's the price of admission? And on the audio, I just get more whistling, but I'm hearing nothing. Although Kevin does hear a whisper in the room near him. Nothing on his camera, nothing on my audio in review time. We get no much further with this guy, so we start playing a bit of a distraction game, losing the finger off the glass. How fast can you move this glass and lose our 5 or 6 fingers? And it speeds up so much, it loses everybody's finger and then comes to a standstill. So we all applaud. It's like, yeah, you did it, great. I mean, that's, must have a lot of energy with that speed. After this brief opportunity to praise him, we turn back to the fact that, you know what, it's not very nice how you're treating this lady. I know you're married, but she's not happy, or wasn't happy, that you made money off the back of her and exploited her, and that's what you've done. And he's like, yeah, not bothered, just didn't care. Julia sort of says, I feel like she didn't like being looked at. We learn that the pair didn't have any children, which is not really surprising. I turn to sort of say, why are you guys down here? Why are you choosing the cellar to inhabit when there's the rest of this place? And it's the other spirits upstairs. They don't allow them up, or certainly don't allow him up or her up. I'm not sure which one. But yeah, they have to stay down here. Say, wouldn't you rather be somewhere else? And the spirit spells home. Well, where's home? And this is a man saying France. I ask, where in France? It spells out Leon. I'm like, cool, that's great. Well, why don't you go? No. Sai's like, what's more important, bullying this woman or going to France? You can just go to France. Leave her alone now, you're dead. No, he won't leave. You know, we've learnt that the woman is not from France. This is where Kevin hears 4 breaths in his ear. But, again, nothing caught on our audio or video. Now, a little bit later, David from episode 2 comes down. He's working, and he says, how's it going, guys? And we say, it's this weird thing about a performer, you know, on stage. She was a dwarf, and he exploited her. And David says, this place did used to have variety nights when it was a theatre. That sort of thing would have been possible. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I was glad that we had France and Leon, and I'm like, Leon, is it in France? Yes, it is. That's good, you know? And as David, Sai and I all talk about what we've had on the recording, whistling all underneath it, like he's just sat nonchalantly listening and... weird. I'm trying to coerce this lady to the board. She's the one that we feel for. Julia starts to get upset. Just not her emotion, but feel upset. And Sue and Jill just end up going cold. They feel something so close to them. Now this is where on my audio I hear a female humming. Now that isn't any of us, so that was brilliant. Although at this stage, Jill feels her hair get touched, and not long after starts feeling it be stroked. After asking a bunch of questions to this lady on the board, the first response she responds to is 4-5, 4-5, 4. What's 4-5? 1945? 1845? You lived at number 45? Turns out something happened 45 times, and it was... She spells men. Now, the fella made money off her by dressing her as a boy, like the Crankies old thing, and yeah, pimping her out basically as a boy, as a young boy, because she's small. Now obviously we're all on the side of this woman and trying to talk to her as much as we can. She tells us that the pair were a touring couple. They went on from here to Leeds, which isn't far away, it makes sense. And they would have had big venues just the same. She says that, you know, 2 of her attacks were in this building. And so you can see why that marriage has been a bad decision for her. We've somewhat gained her trust at this stage. She tells us she was from Devon. She met this guy on a passenger ship that she worked on. Now France to Devon, again, not that unbelievable really. They met, not necessarily fell in love, but came to an agreement, and they were going to make some money. And eventually she goes on to say, my name is Sarah Harper. Pretty cool when they give us a full name. That's trust, that is. I think it was Sarah that says, I want that door to be kept closed at the top. You know, I think the guy opens it, she closes it. She doesn't want the spirits upstairs to bully her, I think was the way she put it. It seems like those supposed nice spirits upstairs, their old-fashioned ways, saw her as a freak. And another thing, the spirits don't ask to be moved on. They, you know, don't use Sai, the green man, to get out of there. For whatever reason, they both stay where they are. And Sarah certainly refuses to join the women spirits upstairs and leave him in the cellar. So, we're getting to the end of the night now, and Jill feels a stabbing in her heart, which is obviously worrying, but that wears off. Sai actually feels a finger prod him in the back. So this is a really good find, this cellar, you know, had really good activity. It was just a fascinating night, as most of them are. But yeah, that cinema really gave us some good stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I love your thoughts. And really, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching. See you next time.